Of course, Bruno Foundation, themagicalcoach.org, Butch Russo, much love and respect. Thank you, sir. Turnpike for years, the Carpenters for years, his brother Dennis, love what they do. Now I understand why this place looks so good. Now, I want to talk to you, Mr. Winters. Motown, Beach Boys, or the Beatles growing up?
Motown.
All right, good. Now we're definitely on the same page. So you were a part of the 60s. And that was the last golden era when the mills were booming, the potteries were booming, Liverpool, like Beaver Falls, open on Thursday night, wall-to-wall people. Did you guys have any sense of what was going to happen? Obviously, the Vietnam War was on, but when the mills started closing down in the 70s and the early 80s, were they talking about that at all in the 60s, or was it full throttle back then?
Pretty much full throttle. I think the year I graduated from Liverpool was the largest graduating class. There were like 480 some graduating seniors. The whole school's probably half of that now.
Right.
But not only Liverpool, it affected up and down the valley. Even as far down as Steubenville and up Newcastle, whatever. But at that point in time, Liverpool was booming. It was the biggest town in the county, biggest city. Things were thriving. The teams were good,
School district was large. You, of course, a former educator and also a guy who went to play for the University of Pittsburgh. Tomorrow, Boston College, 93.7 The Fan. Coons Market, that Pittsburgh tradition, my sportscast early on, tomorrow and Sunday, and then the Coons Market Black and Gold Sunday show. All right, so he is Larry Bruno's nephew. So explain that story.
Right. Larry and my mother are brothers and sisters. They were the only children in the family. Larry was dating Jenny, and so that they could be together longer. My dad was the youngest in the family that could do that, and he had to go get her at night so she didn't walk home alone. Well, he ended up meeting Gracie there at the Bruno's, and
one thing led to
Jenny's
another.
my aunt, and Larry's my uncle. And, yeah, family's married. Of course, my dad had there were 13 in the family at that point in time. So he probably enjoyed getting out of the house at times.
I bet.
Big Italian family.
Listen, when I think of East Liverpool, I think of a lot of people that are friends to me because I spent 2 decades doing play-by-play sports there. Potter football team had a nice run, Coach Cusick, and tonight I was in Liverpool last night at the Fieldhouse. Cade Reynolds and the Potters start their season. Geneva's got this little tip-off thing going on tonight. 9 o'clock tip, plenty of time to get there. They take on Lincoln Park. So let's talk about that Fieldhouse. And obviously you had graduated, but when that Fieldhouse came along, there's not a better venue, I think, anywhere to watch high school basketball than Potter Fieldhouse.
No, I go back to several games. We enjoy it, and even when they had a tournament games there. But that place for a long while there, when Nick was there, that place was it was rocking, boy. And they could compete with anybody.
They could. Much. And Stevie Flores, I had a little bit to do with him getting into the University of Pittsburgh. He ended up at Youngstown State. I wish he would have stayed at Pitt, but I want to talk about Pitt a little bit. And obviously there was some
side note. I coached his dad at Kent State Extension.
Get out of here.
Yeah. We went all the way to the finals of the state, whatever that was called, the
regional branch, stuff.
Yeah. High state.
So let me ask you something. Football is what you really ended up matriculating to college, but basketball was pretty near and dear to you, huh?
Yes, it was. I really enjoyed it.
The old MA down at Kent State.
And the thing is with Beaver Falls connection here with Larry and
Frank
Liverpool,
Chan.
Frank Chan was my high school coach.
And he coached Beaver Falls, Oscar Jackson, Gary Gooseby to a state championship in 70.
He did.
Listen, I've been around a few years, so I can relate to a lot of the things you're talking about. But I live in the present, and I love what's going on with this young basketball coach at East Liverpool and obviously Lincoln Park. Do you realize, and you're in the same age group, it'll be 60 years since the 1965 Midland team beat Stilton Highspire with Norm Van Leer and Simi Hill. 60 years, 1965. Did you ever scrimmage them, or did you ever see them play?
played against him.
Tell me about that.
Oh, what so happened, it was my junior year. We played at Midland. And I played a lot my junior year. And I was in the game at the time. And it was early in the game. And I had a shot from the corner, I'm deadly. Well, I remember going up and shooting the ball. And I heard whap. And you know how the stands were there in the corner. The ball went back and hit the wall.
Was it Simi?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
That's the last shot I took, I think, that night. And that wasn't like me because I didn't mind shooting.
Well, this is a great story. And we
beat them in Liverpool next year. But they were all gone.
They were all gone by then. That's right. Well, listen, so we were talking about some of the former celebrities who worked at the radio station. And I was just early on in my career here. And best thing that ever happened was I left here and went to Liverpool because I kind of found my way in the world of sports and everything. But so many great stories. Bob Barrickman, God rest his soul, best. Chris Shovlin, Mike Romai, these guys, pure talent, going back to Jim Reynolds, Chuck Wilson, WBVP was really a big part of my life, but it was always KDK on in my household. But so one year I was putting together social media stuff, my top 10 basketball players from Beaver County. And I was at a holiday tournament at the Community College Golden Dome, and Jimmy Deep, no longer with us, good guy. I had put Chris Pipkin and Gabe Jackson from my alma mater like 1 and 2, and everybody was just reading me the riot act. What about that 70 team in Beaver Falls? What about Simi Hill, Norm Van Leer? And I just loved Chris Pipkin because this guy, who's now a police officer and a really good guy, could jump out of the gym. So somebody said to me, well, you know who his dad was? And I'm like, no, it was Simi Hill. And here the story came out in the paper shortly after that Chris Pipkin, his dad was Simi Hill. And I'm thinking, no wonder the guy was such an incredible talent. How good was that team, though?
Oh, they were awesome. I believe my sophomore year, they got beat by Uniontown in the finals of the state. And of course, they did Liverpool. We went up there and play ball. They come down there and play ball. But I remember at the end, I'm pretty sure it was Van Leer or Hill. I guess I can't remember. I'm too old now. But
said,
they'll never beat us again. And boy, they held
all she wrote.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were driven.
Uniontown, one of your assistant coaches during your days at East Liverpool, spent a little time there, but obviously known as the winningest coach in the history of the WPIL. Upper St. Clair, my good friend, he's been here. Jim Render. Talk about Jim Render as a young assistant coach and your football days at East Liverpool.
Well, I think Liverpool was probably his first coaching job.
I think it was.
He was young. And he lived with I think there was 4 of them lived out in Glenmore, all brand young coaches, all became head coaches, all were super successful. None quite as successful as Coach Render, but he was a player's coach, He's the one that helped me get into Pitt,
Render?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Doc, there's a doctor in Liverpool that played at Pitt, Dr. McCutcheon. He helped also when they started recruiting me. And ironically, they recruited me by coming to my basketball games. So
that's what
I imagine they had film on football, but
But how much of a mentor, because you played quarterback, and every quarterback that played for Larry Bruno here in Beaver Falls went on to play at college. So obviously he was known as the magical coach because deception, hiding the ball. Frank Morocco tells the story coming to take a look at Joe Namath for a college coach. He said, Coach, I wish I could tell you, but I never could find the ball because he was such a master at hiding the ball. Talk about what Larry Bruno did for you, you being his nephew.
Well, I'd like to say something about what you just mentioned.
Go.
Because I can Larry was the magical coach. He did his magic tricks, and I even had him at one of my kids' birthday parties, doing a magic show for the kids. But, and storytelling. He was a storyteller.
Yeah, he was.
And the story, when he was doing his magic tricks, was to get that deception. While you're doing one thing, he's
doing something else.
He's fatiguing another one over here,
Mm-hmm.
But he was something else. And you know, deception, magic was the key. Faking. I learned from him how to fake, football. My son learned from him how to fake a football. My younger son was too young, but he learned how to fish with Larry. And
no kidding.
Oh yeah, they went fishing. Larry lived down in Columbiana for a while, but my younger Joey was probably 6, 7, 8, right in there. There was a large gap between the older and the younger one. Michael was in high school at that time, but they'd go fishing. Larry would get Michael probably more than he did with me, because it was easier to get a hold of Michael. Michael was a good student. Had this little pink pad, and he'd write stuff down. And when he'd see his games and that, or even they'd get the film and bring it over and watch the film, and he would tell Michael, Joey, he would write stuff on napkins. Every time if you ask Joey, what do you remember about your uncle? He'd say napkin plays. He must have 1 million plays on napkins.
Listen, my uncle, who cut more deals and quit school in 6th grade, but owned a bunch of real estate, went on to do incredible things, had a car lot, just was always generating revenue, made more of his deals at D'Angelo's Donuts on a paper napkin. He always carried a small 2-lead pencil with him. And he said, well, let's just figure it out. And every napkin, it just kept piling up and writing stuff down. So there's something to be said about that form of shorthand. Look, before I let you go, and I was telling this to Butch early, when my friends were making their way here at WBVP, I was doing the same thing at WOHI. Why is it, even on Thanksgiving, that I would go down there to interview this coach? Why do I love that town so much? What is it about East Liverpool? Because I really am from Beaver County, and doing all of these videos, the tens of thousands of free videos that I've done since 2009, I've kind of rekindled Beaver County again. But I've spent a lot of time in Ohio because that was always kind of like my home. And every time I say, okay, that's enough, no more, stop, something plucks at my heartstrings. Why do I love that place so much, Chuck?
Well,
because it's not much different than Beaver Falls.
And that's what I was going to say. It's you look at the river towns, Beaver Falls, Beaver County. People are genuine.
They are.
They'll tell you what they think, but they're honest about it, and you'll get a fair shake. The old mixture of all the ethnic groups, and it's just in this to me, in this part of and when I played ball in Pittsburgh, this part of the country is probably the most together part you'd ever see.
But those guys really knew how to pull my strings. I mean, look, I was telling Butch, I've been fired, run over by a truck. I mean, beat down, stepped on, and I just keep coming back because of the late Frank Mangano, who made me believe I could do anything. When I did national television for the first time, he called me. I mean, I'll never forget that. And he also knew I was competitive, so I started to sell a little bit. And my big brothers from different mothers, obviously, Bob Burbick and Ron Offenbaugh, names you know. I mean, I was selling advertising for 20 years when I didn't even need to do it. And my paychecks were basically going to spend on people when I would take them out before the games. It was just the experience of being in Liverpool. And even last night, being in that field house the night before the season starts, it's great. And here's the other connection. Do you realize 1970, and now I know where it came from. Frank Chan's team always came out to one song, and the Potters still come out to that song the last time I checked. Cliff Noble's The Horse.
The Horse.
Beaver Falls is marching band, right, Butch? That's like their claim to fame. And all these years I'm in East Liverpool going, why do I know that song? Why do I? And I knew who wrote it and who sang it, and it was a top 40 hit. But I'm like, why am I associating this with athletics? Because of Frank Chan.
Rob,
and I've been hearing about you for years.
You say about the ads and that. I had a friend tell me that you used to come down there to the radio station, not working or anything, just come down.
Yeah.
And in 5 minutes, get on the phone and sell all the ads they needed to sell. And then they would take off. They loved seeing you.
Can I tell you something? I loved it so much that it was like a joy. And these people to this day, many of them I mentioned, Rails Market, Cassidy, Emmanuel, would be here all day. Bigger, of course. It's only because when I needed them for that $100 bill, they were there for me, and I never, ever forgot it. Ever forgot it. And what this True North is doing down there and all the good things that are happening, you got the vault down there, that beautiful restaurant, Liverpool is a great place still, but I'll never forget, I'm dating a girl from Midland. Butch will appreciate this, and you too, Chuck. It's Thursday night. And I said, what are you going to do? She goes, let's get on to East Liverpool. And I knew nothing about Liverpool, didn't even know where it was at. And I'm thinking, is that like an hour and a half away? Where is it? So I go into Ogilvy's department store on a Thursday night before Christmas. I think that's where my love affair began. You know, people ask me all the time, do you miss that girl you dated? Yeah, sure. But I would have missed Liverpool a lot more. Yeah. It was just, and then Frank ends up, Mangano, one of my true mentors that I love to this day and still visit his grave every Thanksgiving, no matter what, was there yesterday. He ended up buying Ogilvy's, the building, and he ended up moving out to Calcutta. And we would just have these conversations, and just to be in Ogilvy's and actually be in the same building, I couldn't wait. I'd leave KDKA, Chuck. I was shaking. I couldn't wait to get to East Liverpool. And I just can only imagine from all the stories, Mary Tambolini and all these stories that I've heard through the years of what that place was like when you were in high school. Guys like Burbick and that. It must have been just incredible to be a part of that community.
It was. And that's when Jill ran
Ogilvy's. Yeah. Winners. Now, what's the connection there? Because I was trying to figure this out the other day, okay, Betty and all them.
Jill's mother,
Betty,
was married to my dad's brother, Michael.
And Betty, of course, at one time with Frank Mangano.
Well, Mike had it when I was young, probably. Mike was a captain on the police force. He's the one that actually got my dad on the police force. Like I said, there were 8 brothers. You know, 3 of them I think were ended up policemen, but. When I was probably 6, 7, Mike had a heart attack and died. And 25 years later, her and Frank got together. So
listen, Betty talked me off the ledge many times. I loved Betty. And Jill was a dear soul too, and still is. But I mean, Betty and I have a lot of respect. This is what I mean. It was family down there. Mm-hmm. And every time I try to get out, somebody says, hey, can you help me out? It's like Cade Reynolds, this basketball coach. This kid, he's literally got me so fired up about basketball again. And I'll tell you, no matter what anyone says, and I'm sure they feel the same way here in Beaver Falls, February, snow, there's no better place to be than Potter Fieldhouse and watching a basketball game.
It's a fun time.
It is a fun time.
Not as packed as it used to be, but it can be again.
Well, there's a lot of distractions, but I'll say this, and I understand the only thing that's constant is change. The good folks at St. Barnabas, many of my dear friends, they have given this radio station an incredible venue. But the thing that I really miss the most is that WOHI is no longer in East Liverpool. That little radio station. And if I would ever hit the lottery, the first thing I would do, I would put a little radio station back in Ohio, and I'd get some people to do those games again. Because every time I did a game, and our mutual friend, the late Jerry Stovall, he'd always say, why do you love this so much? Because I always thought about the woman or man down in the East End that couldn't get to the games anymore, that had that radio, and they just had to listen to that game. To me, that's the people that made me want to go to work every day.
You know what my wife and I talk about? The Chester Hour. Remember that?
Oh, listen to me. Bob Gray. Listen to me. That was one of the first gigs I had, Chuck, running the volume controls. This guy, how can I explain who he was? It was kind of like a radio version of Hee Haw.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
That's good.
But he was so dynamic. Frank Higginbotham, Virginia Avenue Church of Christ. This guy had a show every day. He who believeth and is baptized is saved. I loved this guy. In fact, so much, long after he passed, his voice was still on the answer machine.
Yeah, right.
2:00 in the morning, I'd call the church just to hear his voice. That's how much I loved him. How about some of those legendary bars that are no longer in Liverpool? The Dandy Bar.
Dandy Bar.
Classic. Loved it. The Colonial. Loved it. You know, Ferrello's now, different versions. Casa. Loved it still.
Had the best hamburgers. I'll tell you. Delicious.
Listen, you realize I pretty much paid Frank to work there. And he was so smart. We used to sell these like 5-foot bunnies and Santa Clauses to put in the windows of different merchants for like a package of commercials. And he'd walk in and go, whoever sells the most rabbits or whatever, I'll give him a little $20 bill. Now, I didn't need that $20 bill because it was going to be gone before I got out of Ogilvy's. But okay, Frank, I'm going to show you right now. And honestly, that night that I was on national TV, I did a boxing match. Just was a ring announcer. when Frank called me, it truly was. To this day, it chokes me up.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing about Frank, and we'll move on, Christmas Eve, midnight mass, St. Al's. We did it for years. So my first Christmas, I'm away from my parents. They got me doing that. So the cars, I'm jammed in. I can't get out of the parking lot. So I'm really getting honked off now. I got to go home. My grandmother's cooking. So I told Father Esposito, I said, look, you got to make an announcement after the homily. Somebody's got to move their car. Here's the license plate. This guy's got to go. Next thing you know, Frank comes walking in. Who asked for me to move my car? Listen, I love the guy. You have always been one of the many people that I've wanted to meet because I've heard so much about you, and your dear friend Bob Berbick, who never calls me about anything other than something that he wants to hear or see. And he said, hey, please send me a copy of this interview. You really have done incredibly well for yourself because of a lot of hard work.
Thank you.
You have. And do you realize Pitt and Ohio State, you're not leaving yet.
2:30.
Yeah, I know. But the connection, and you got Ohio State and Michigan this weekend.
Yeah.
And you got Pitt and Boston College.
That's a big one. We need a win.
Bad. Is Narduzzi the answer, do you think? I mean, he's long-term, but I mean, are you happy with him?
You know, at times I am and times I'm not. I guess the same way with every coach, you know, but I was thrilled when we were 7-0.
Me too.
We got beat 2 games. 2 games we beat ourselves, you know. So right now, you know, if you'd have told me we'd won 7 games, I don't know if I'd have believed you.
I saw a picture of my dear friend who you know from those days at Pitt, Ralph Sindrich, on social media. I love Ralph Sindrich, man. You kind of have a little bit of that same bravado about you, that graveled voice a little bit.
We used to when I drive down to Liverpool, I'd drop him off at Beaver to see his girlfriend. Ended up marrying her.
She's from Beaver.
Yeah. Well,
I never knew that. Wow. You know who was supposed to come today, but obviously got tied up at the farm, Frank Dawson. We'll end on this note. What has Frank Dawson meant to East Liverpool?
I'll tell you what, when I was in high school, or probably before that even, but once I got there, Frank was the trainer.
Yep.
I mean,
he made that little card up with all the little stuff that he needed.
We every night go in there, you know, get ankle backs would get their ankles taped and that, you know. He had his hands in a little bit of everything, but you know, he was one of those guys that you know, once he started talking, you lost track of everything else. You just wanted to listen to Frank.
Listen, I've been, and I'm not name dropping, but I'm trying to prove a point. I've interviewed Ronald Reagan. I've done everything you could ever imagine. But if somebody told me there was a radio station back in Ohio and you had to do a sports show to interview Chuck Winters at Casa de Emmanuel, I'd tell the former president, look, I really wish I had time. I love East Liverpool, and I thank you so much for coming here today.
It's been my pleasure.
Larry Bruno, in a minute or less, what did he mean to you as his nephew? One thing about Larry, he always made you feel as though, including me, that you were the most important person in the room.
I mean, he was family. You know that everybody else talks about him as a coach and this and that, but you know, I think our relationship, especially during the years he was in Columbiana, my kids were, you know, right there with him also. It was like a grandpa to him, and my dad had passed away. He was just somebody who, no matter what, could make you laugh, feel good.
He did. And I don't think a lot of people realize he could have coached at any level. I mean, the guy, he stayed here because it was family, like me in East Liverpool. You just get comfortable because you love the people you're around. I mean, Namath could have been his ticket anywhere after that thing, you know, he loved it here.
He did.
He did. Hey, thank you.
And the stories he would tell about it.
Oh, listen, he was right about your hands. Burbick said, this guy's got the biggest hands going. All right, look, that's it. Larry Bruno Foundation, have a seat. TheMagicalCoach.org. It's your Pratt Pack. Don't forget, back on the radio tomorrow and that Coons Market Black and Gold Sunday and those sportscast all weekend. And there's always more sports at 93.7thefan.com.